Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, turning on the news, and seeing bold headlines declaring the outbreak of a new global conflict, what some fearfully call World War III. The images that might come to mind are of tanks crossing borders, fighter jets streaking across the skies, and armies clashing in open battle. Yet the deeper truth is that the most dangerous battles of our time may not be fought with missiles or soldiers. Instead, they are unfolding quietly in the digital space, in economic systems, and across fragile diplomatic alliances. This is the battlefield of the modern era, unpredictable, invisible, and far more complex than traditional wars. The year 2025 has been described by many analysts as a turning point in global history. It is not simply another year on the calendar, but a moment where long-developing tensions are beginning to surface. Across the world, powerful nations are making moves that could change the global balance in ways unseen since the Cold War. These shifts are rarely discussed in mainstream headlines, yet they hold the potential to reshape how nations trade, how economies survive, and how people live their everyday lives. While the public sees fragmented stories about conflicts or elections, the real struggle for power is happening behind closed doors, in boardrooms, and in strategic military planning sessions. The United States, for decades considered the world's uncontested superpower, now finds itself at a crossroads. Political polarization at home, economic challenges such as inflation and debt, and the rising costs of global commitments have weakened Washington's position. For the first time in a generation, serious questions are being asked. Can the U.S. still lead the world as it once did? And if not, who is ready to step into that role? These uncertainties create opportunities for rival nations to push forward, testing the boundaries of American influence. China has been preparing for this moment for years. Rather than relying solely on military expansion, Beijing has strategically built its influence across continents. From Africa to Latin America, Chinese companies are constructing ports, highways, and digital infrastructure. These projects are not simple acts of generosity, they are tools of influence, binding nations into economic relationships that give China leverage. This expansion has allowed Beijing to challenge Western dominance without firing a single shot, shifting the balance of power toward the East through trade, technology, and long-term investment strategies. Russia, though often portrayed as weakened by sanctions and war, remains a central disruptor in this shifting landscape. Its invasion of Ukraine has already reshaped European security, forcing NATO to reconsider its strategies and Europe to seek new energy sources. At the same time, Moscow has deepened its ties with Beijing, forming a partnership that could dramatically alter global dynamics. Russia's resilience demonstrates that traditional power cannot simply be erased through isolation. Instead, it adapts, creating new alliances and playing a crucial role in the multipolar world emerging before our eyes. The Middle East continues to stand as one of the world's most unpredictable regions. Long-standing rivalries, religious divides, and competing political ambitions create an environment where even a minor spark can escalate into something far larger. Tensions between Iran and Israel, uncertainty within Gulf leadership, and shifting U.S. involvement all combine to form a volatile mix. The region's strategic importance, home to vital energy supplies and trade routes, means that any conflict here would not stay local. It would have ripple effects across Europe, Asia, and beyond, reminding the world just how interconnected global security has become. Beyond the traditional military landscape, another battleground is quietly emerging: technology. In the 21st century, power is not measured only by the number of tanks or warships a country possesses. Instead, control over artificial intelligence, satellite communications, and advanced cyber capabilities may prove to be far more decisive. A nation that dominates digital infrastructure can shape economies, disrupt governments, and even influence public opinion globally. This technological arms race is unfolding rapidly, and its outcome may determine which power blocks hold the upper hand in the decades ahead. The year 2025 is therefore more than a symbolic milestone. It marks a moment when global strategies are colliding, military doctrines, economic systems, and political ideologies are all being tested at once. Western powers fear the erosion of their dominance, while emerging nations demand a greater voice in shaping international rules. The friction between these two visions of the world order is intensifying. What once was a relatively stable hierarchy of power is now being replaced by uncertainty, where multiple players compete for leadership and influence. NATO, long considered the backbone of Western defense, faces a delicate balancing act. On one hand, the alliance has expanded, bringing in new members who seek protection against potential threats. On the other hand, doubts are rising within Europe about whether the United States can still provide consistent leadership. The debates inside NATO are not simply about military spending. They reflect deeper anxieties about trust, reliance, and the future of transatlantic unity. A divided NATO could encourage adversaries to push forward more aggressively, further destabilizing global security. Across the Pacific, the Taiwan Strait remains one of the most dangerous flashpoints on Earth. China's firm position on reunification, coupled with increasing U.S. support for Taiwan, creates the possibility of direct confrontation between the world's two largest economies. Such a scenario would not only disrupt regional stability but could also impact global supply chains, especially in the semiconductor industry that Taiwan dominates. The outcome of this struggle will influence not just Asia, but the entire world's technological and economic future, making it one of the most closely watched crises of our time. North Korea remains one of the most unpredictable players on the global stage. Despite its relatively small economy, the country wields nuclear capabilities that grant it outsized influence. Each missile test or declaration from Pyongyang sends waves of uncertainty across Asia and beyond. What makes the situation even more complex is the nation's tendency to operate outside conventional diplomatic channels, relying instead on bold moves and sudden announcements. This unpredictability means that even a seemingly small incident could trigger a regional confrontation with consequences far greater than anyone anticipates. The economic front is proving to be just as explosive as the military one. Rising inflation, widening debt crises, and trade restrictions are reshaping the way nations interact with one another. Economic tools are increasingly being used as weapons, through sanctions, tariffs, and resource control. Meanwhile, new blocs of countries, particularly those aligned with China and the BRICS partnership, are pushing to create alternatives to Western financial systems. These efforts aim to reduce reliance on the US dollar, a move that could dramatically alter the global economic order if it gains enough momentum. The possibility of a shift away from the US dollar raises critical questions about America's financial stability. For decades, the dollar has been the backbone of global trade and investment, giving the US a unique advantage in shaping world affairs. But if major economies begin conducting trade in alternative currencies, the dollar's dominance could weaken. This would not only affect the United States but also destabilize international markets, impacting everything from energy prices to investment flows. In this sense, the global currency debate is not just about economics. It is directly tied to national security and power. Energy has always been a decisive factor in geopolitics, and this remains true today. The war in Ukraine highlighted how vulnerable Europe became when energy supplies were disrupted, forcing nations to rapidly diversify their sources. Looking forward, control over renewable technologies, rare earth minerals, and advanced energy infrastructure could become the new weapons of global competition. Countries that lead in these areas will not only secure their own independence but also gain significant leverage over others, shaping the next era of international power struggles. Africa is emerging as one of the most contested regions in this struggle for influence. Long overlooked in global strategy, the continent now holds immense importance due to its vast natural resources, young population, and growing economies. China has invested heavily in infrastructure projects, Russia has extended its reach through private security contractors, and the United States is trying to reinforce its presence with diplomatic and security initiatives. The outcome of this competition will not only determine Africa's future but could also tilt the global balance of power, making it a crucial stage in the unfolding story of the 21st century. Latin America is another region quietly reshaping the world order. Once seen primarily as a sphere of U.S. influence, countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Venezuela are now exploring stronger ties with China, Russia, and other emerging powers. Brazil, in particular, has taken a leading role in BRICS, advocating for greater independence from Western-dominated financial systems. This growing multipolarity means that Latin America is no longer just reacting to global shifts, it is actively participating in them. The region's vast natural resources, agricultural strength, and energy potential make it a valuable partner in the global contest for influence. But does this all mean World War III is inevitable? Not necessarily in the traditional sense of massive armies clashing across continents. Instead, what the world is witnessing is a hybrid war, a conflict fought across multiple domains simultaneously. Currency battles, cyber warfare, disinformation campaigns, and control over energy routes are all elements of this modern struggle. While it might not resemble the devastating wars of the 20th century, the stakes are just as high because the consequences can reshape economies, societies, and alliances without a single formal declaration of war. One of the most unsettling aspects of this new era is how much of it unfolds away from public attention. Citizens around the world are often focused on local politics or trending topics online, while governments and corporations make quiet deals that reshape entire regions. New trade agreements, military partnerships, and digital infrastructure projects are signed behind closed doors. By the time the public hears about them, the balance of power may have already shifted. This silent evolution makes the global situation harder to predict and even harder to control. History reminds us that no empire lasts forever. Ancient Rome, colonial Britain, and the Soviet Union all believed their dominance would endure indefinitely. Yet cycles of rise and decline eventually reshaped the global order. Today, many wonder if the United States faces a similar test. The question is not only whether America can maintain its leadership but also whether the world is prepared for a future where power is more widely distributed. A multipolar system may reduce dependency on one superpower, but it also increases the risks of competition and instability. The most shocking truth is that if a third world war ever does begin, it may not start with bombs or missiles. Instead, it could emerge from a sudden financial collapse, a large-scale cyber attack, or a dramatic shift in global alliances. These scenarios would instantly disrupt economies and societies worldwide, catching billions of people off guard. In this sense, the struggle of 2025 is not just about who holds the most weapons, it is about who controls the systems, networks, and resources that keep the modern world running. And once those foundations are shaken, the global order will never look the same again.